Hey everyone, this is Keith Scott from out in Sydney, Australia. I'm one of the voices of Bullwinkle J. Moose. It's time to watch Relentless and Unstoppable. And so give it up for your main hosts, Douglas Kenny and Andy McPhee.
That makes sense. What was New Zealand like when shooting the scenes when it came to the water horse?
Well, it's I seem to get myself into the situation a lot. I work, working with kids, working with a period piece, working with a book adaptation. I mean, I'd done all of that a couple of times before, so I found myself in that situation again, except this time we had to add the level of visual effects to it. And so it was particularly challenging because we had a lot of scenes that took place in the water with the creature. And so, how are we going to do that? I mean, we found a great lake down in the South Island, New Zealand, which we used as the lock. And we did shoot some in there, but it just wasn't practical to put a young boy out in the water and, which was very dangerous. And we had like big boats, as you recall the movie, a big, like you know, um, a PT boat, we would call them here. It was during World War II. So you had a military boat in the water, and it was just too dangerous to try to do out on the lake. And we had the effect of the creature that we had to deal with too, which was basically a big, sometimes it was just a tennis ball on the end of a stick, but other times it was a model of the creature that we had on like a jet ski that we could use. So what we did is we built a big giant pool at the studio that Peter Jackson has in Wellington, Stone Street, and we built a giant pool and put a big green screen around it, and so that's how we shot a lot of the stuff. The water scenes was actually in that pool where we could control safety and just control everything. So that's how we did that.
That sounds great. So everyone, part of the story of the water horse is Angus McMorrow befriends Crusoe in large part because he's filling in a hole left in here when his father didn't survive the war and went down with his ship. And so Crusoe wants to, it basically provides that filling in Angus's heart. And Angus wants to keep Crusoe, but he's forced because of Crusoe's growth to eventually release him into the wild. And he does it without his folks and family knowing. But then it starts going into the wrong direction when some military troops from the ongoing conflict in World War II show up at his place pretty much for the sake of defending Scotland from submarines and enemies, and it ends up endangering Crusoe. And so when Angus tries to protect his friend, he comes across to the troops and his family as being a little bit loony, and he has to prove at some point that the monster is real, you know?
Yeah, big spoiler alert for everyone. So if you watch the movie, forget everything he just said. But yes, that's all. That's all true. That's a good description, and it is that water horse is a metaphor for the kid's father who he lost in the war. So that is a bit of a spoiler, but that's the emotional core of the movie, and that's one of the things that attracted me to it because it had a number of levels. It wasn't just a kid and a creature. It had a deeper level to it about loss and, loss of a parent in particular. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering where the title Water Horse came from because I didn't recall reading much about the Loch Ness Monster being a water horse, but now it makes sense.
Well, it was first of all, that was the name of Dick King Smith's book, but where he got the title is in Scotland. They call the creature because the legend of the creature even predates this idea of the Loch Ness monster. In fact, we play around with that a little bit in the movie, which is the idea of this creature living in the loch in the dark loch was it was called a number of things. It was called a kelpie. It was called a water horse. It was called various names, and it was about a creature that lived in the loch, and it was seriously scary because it would beckon you on to take a ride on it across the loch, but it would, as soon as it would get halfway over, it would dive down to the bottom and kill you. And so it was based on this kind of dark legend. But then, much later, when this kind of joke fraud picture was taken by this dentist, I think he was in Scotland, where they made it look like there was a creature out in the water, and that's the famous picture that we all see of the Loch Ness monster. And so that kind of changed the legend at that point. But the legend goes back thousands of years, the previous
Wow.
to that picture. Yeah.
Gee, that's all we have for Relentless and Unstoppable. So tune into the next episode to hear more amazing stories from amazing guests. This is Keith Scott from Sydney, Australia, saying so long, and I'm smarter than the average bear. Gee.